Welcome to another Compass in this particular time of lockdown, and to the Chief Constable and I debating in front of you the questions that are important to the public we both serve. So it's been 6 weeks since the country entered a state of lockdown, and in order to protect the NHS and save lives was the hallmark of that, and that continues. And during this time, policing has done, I think, myself, but importantly, we've had surveys with the public to indicate that in Hampshire Constabulary, we're doing a fantastic job. You and your team are doing a fantastic job in difficult circumstances to explain, engage and encourage, and only if necessary to enforce the measures, the new powers that you've been given to keep us all safe. This conversation will probably in that context focus on the things where people still have concerns, but I wanted to say up front that the reports of engagement and of policing and our public, our communities having conversations together to come to reasonable responses to keep us all safer is the underlying stance, and we need to just test and answer some questions for the public that they've asked me. So I thought I would begin by asking you, Chief Constable, for an overall picture of how the lockdown has gone in Hampshire and how policing has managed its enforcement.
Thank you. It's a really important question, as you say, 6 weeks in, and we know, and we said at the beginning, didn't we expect to be this one way or another for the long haul. I mean, the overall answer to your question is the public of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight have responded fantastically, because this is all about protecting the NHS and saving lives, and therefore the police role, which is a part of that, is focused in exactly the same way. And it's a very different role for policing. So you'll remember last time we spoke, we span our whole operating model within 72 hours to get ourselves ready for this. And I'm really, really proud of the way all the officers, staff and volunteers have done it. They've taken on the new role, they understand it, and they're doing it brilliantly. And they're out there with hundreds of interactions with the public every single day from across the constabulary. And the vast, vast majority of the public are absolutely adhering to both the spirit but also the letter of the regulations. And they're not exactly the same thing, as you know. But in terms of, where we are, as you say, we're engaging with the public, we're explaining and we're encouraging people to stick with the government guidelines, and people largely are. And to give you a sense of scale, when we do have to do enforcement, and it really is the tiniest amount that we need to do that, it's a handful a day, Commissioner. It's really, really small. And indeed, even half of that handful are people who we're not giving them a ticket for that reason, but they've got a background in some fairly tricky crime. So, some people who have got a criminal background are also then, fairly stubborn about being where they should be. So we're not using it for that purpose, but it is interesting to me that that's where we often are giving out those tickets when we need to. But as you referred to, the survey that you and your staff have undertaken is hugely supportive of not just policing across our area, but also all agencies, including the health service, about how well they are doing in tackling the crisis in our area. And I'm very grateful to you, Commissioner, for doing that survey, because it really helps me as Chief Constable to understand, where we need to put our area, our people. I think when we get the calls, we have about 300 or so calls every day from people concerned about other people breaking the regulation. Most of those are in open spaces, and we will go along and we will encourage people to go home, as you've already said. We do find it a bit more difficult in private spaces, and one particular example, which I totally understand, we have communal gardens and people are in their garden, but they happen to be together. So we're not trying to we are trying to work that through, and officers and staff are, and they have huge doses of common sense, and are trying to keep everyone safe, because that is absolutely what this is all about. There are some specific things though for our area. Beauty spots, we have coast, we have a fantastic island, we have fantastic parks, and I really understand why people, particularly so many weeks in when the sun is shining as we go towards bank holiday, want to go there and enjoy them. So we've really upped our patrols in those areas, but as importantly, actually, whether it's the local authorities, whether it's the owners of those parks, you know, they're making a decision about closing car parks and making those areas inaccessible to some, if they feel that that's right for them to do. And these are grown-up conversations, and as I say, most of the public are adhering to it. You may have seen in the press, certainly we're starting to see on our roads some people taking advantage of quieter roads, and therefore driving faster, and taking advantage of that. We always, particularly in the summer, do a huge amount of proactive work on our roads, and we do loads of speed enforcement. We do loads of looking out for dangerous driving, and we have upped that as well. So on particular areas where we know there can be speeding motorists, we're out there. We're looking to stop them doing it in the first place and keep themselves safe and other people safe. But that's routine business for us. So we've upped our rural patrols. We've absolutely upped our patrols on our roads, as you would expect us to. And in our communities, there's been a really good example only last week down in Havant and Waterlooville, where there were quite a number of concerning reports about driving. So the neighbourhood team went out there, stopped loads of cars, gave out loads of advice, and I'm very much hoping that will have stopped that one in its tracks. And we're still sadly getting tragedy on our road. We've had 4 people die already in the last 6 weeks on our roads, which is of course 4 too many.
The speeding issue, there are people who think that it's okay because they can see far ahead and the roads are clear, and the speed limits clearly don't apply in their mind because they're safe and they're driving. Do we have the capacity? Do you and the team have the capacity? And do you have a message to people that the speed limits are there for a purpose and that they should continue to obey the speed limits, whatever their sense of clear open spaces that they wouldn't normally expect to see?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are seeing that, and you'll have seen it around the country. Not a huge amount, but still concerning to me. And my message is clear. The speed limits are there for a reason. They're there because of the road conditions. They're not there necessarily just about other road users. And of course, in our area, wherever you are, from the most major to the most minor roads, there's loads of wildlife. There's lots of people out walking. There's more people cycling now than there've ever been. I think we've all seen that. And therefore, there are lots and lots of hazards on the road still that every car driver, lorry driver, van driver needs to be aware of. So those speed limits,
and people distancing from pavements and safe areas,
absolutely,
and people cycling in areas where they think the road is clear too. And actually the adherence to the proper safety and safe driving, safe command of the vehicles is as essential now. And you made the point that we've had some fatalities.
Yeah, we have, sadly.
And we need not to change or dial that up, and we need to continue to enforce, I believe, appropriately with the capacity you've got to make sure that people don't think there's a free license to speed.
We are all of that I would entirely agree with, and we have absolutely lots of officers and staff on our roads, and they are out doing what they do well, which is keeping people safe on the roads, and part of that is enforcement, and they haven't missed a step on that at all.
Good. So, and then back to, you were talking about beauty spots and very positively describing the journey so far. Mm-hmm. Elsewhere in the country, for whatever reason, there are beauty spots and places where people have routinely gone when the world was safer and not full of virus, where they're wanting people to stay away from places and looking to create very strong messages about not coming to beauty spots, not coming to beaches, not coming to forestry areas. You have taken, with my agreement too, an engagement approach. Are there any risks from the national stress that some other areas are feeling and wanting to change that can leak into our area? And is there any reinforcing message about that for how one stays appropriate, even if there is later on easement to the lockdown status we have at the moment, how one should say, where is the line? How members of the public should say, this may be fine, that not so fine. Can you identify any points that people should be thinking about if they want to continue to keep themselves and everybody safe?
Well, the test is one of reasonableness. So, you know, if any of us live and have the joy of living near a beach or living near a park, then of course that's somewhere where you can take your daily exercise. It's a test of reasonableness. There are no hard lines, and there's been lots and lots of public debate about it, and I suspect people will do lecture tours on this for years to come. But the point is to examine your motivation and to examine why it is where you're going. And I would link the answer to the last one about us being very much policing on the roads. So what we've been very successful at, and we will absolutely continue as we go into the summer, particularly with the bank holiday coming up, is that we are getting ahead of people before they get to our beaches, before they decide to come down to our national parks from elsewhere in the country. And we're stopping them and asking them why they're going and where they're going. And if they're driving down on an A road and they've got a kayak on the roof, you know, expect to be asked where you're going and why you're going there. So we've done that all the way through. That's not unreasonable. And as I say, the vast majority of people get that, they know it, and actually they've got pretty used to it now already. So my message is to keep doing that. But there are no, you know, that there is guidance, and the guidance is you should exercise close to your home. You should do that in a way that feels responsible and is that, you know, all about protecting the NHS. And, you know, it'll be a matter for, ultimately, I should imagine there'll be case law around it, but that's not where my interest lies. My interest lies in people staying at home and protecting the NHS.
Things that could work. The first one is if you can walk to where you need to go for your exercise and your outdoor experience, that's a good starter for 10. If you need to drive there, don't drive past several other places that you could just as well have stopped to get to somewhere that you're in, perhaps previously in the habit of going. Exactly. And be reasonable and look to be courteous and to keep everybody safe. Okay, I want to go back to the adherence to the rules and just say we share the statistics of the number of people that phone in to report and say that there is a gathering that the reporter feels is inappropriate in this time and is either creating fear or is just a report. Are there any tests that you would like people to apply before they dial in, or how people should look? Because sometimes what you can see out of a window as a gathering can be for a reason, I don't know, or something other. Are we getting too many calls, or are we getting just enough, or who knows?
None of us have done this before. I don't know what the right answer is, but no, I wouldn't want people to put it, if you're concerned about it, tell us, because two things happen then. If it's a gathering outside, then we will turn up and we'll find out what's going on, and that communal garden example is a really good one where we need to talk to people, find out what's going on. But equally, the other thing that those calls help us do is realise where lots of calls are coming from, and that is absolutely informing our patrol plans. So we've got really good data, we map it over our geography, and it really shows kind of hotspots of where concerns are coming in from the public, which is where we therefore patrol routinely.
What about for the people who put a call in and feel they don't know what you did with the call? Are we responding to the calls, telling anybody what, acknowledging them? What should the public expect when they've made the call online or to 101 or?
We're not ringing everyone back. We're upward to 300 a day. We're not ringing everyone back. So my thanks to people for telling us. Most of them are coming in online, which is great, because that means that I can keep my call handlers socially distanced and working effectively, you know, remotely as well, as many as I possibly can. So no, people telling us they're having an acknowledgement anyway, but then, you know, as I say, we will patrol if it's a group, and certainly informs our normal routine patrolling and our daily plans according to where those hotspots are coming in. But no, we don't get back to each and every person, right, regrettably.
So please call in, build up the intelligence picture, and leave it to you and the team to sort out the responses after that. Good. I want to move on to some particular risks that are dialed up or not. in this time. We spoke at the last Compass, when this was even newer than it is now, and it's only still been 6 weeks, about domestic abuse and child abuse, vulnerable children, and fraud and online scams. Yeah. What's your update on? Are those dialing up? Are we seeing different risks from those who wish us harm?
No, thanks for asking. So, yeah, I'm still really concerned about all of those things. So if we start with domestic abuse, the reports to us have gone up a bit, not as much as certainly calls to helplines are going up, but that's absolutely fine. If people are getting help from wherever, brilliant. And I'm really impressed by how the whole of the helpline sector, the charitable sector, which are fantastic in domestic abuse work, have really shifted their operating model so they can continue to provide that advice, which is really great. One of those was on the local news only on Friday, which is the Blue Lamp Trust, where, of course, there are people who are least safe in their own homes, and they're a really good example on the news on Friday about one of our volunteers there, or one of our workers there, going into a home of someone who's being stalked and just making sure the alarms are in place and so on. So real practical stuff is absolutely going on. The other thing that's I'm really encouraged by since all this began is the number of perpetrators who are asking for help. People who know they're living with their family and that, tempers are short, people are worried about money, all sorts of things going on, and they're worried about harming their family, and they're seeking support as well from the Hampton Trust, which is great to see that people are reaching out before anything goes wrong. The other thing that I've noticed is an increase in neighbours ringing in concerns about what they can hear. A lot of windows are open, a lot of people are outside, and people are home more, and they're hearing things that concern them from next door or upstairs, and they're calling us, and I'm really grateful to people for doing that. And I don't want people to worry about doing that. If there is nothing going on, it's fine. We'll attend, we'll find out what there is, and then we'll leave. But I'd much rather know. And we had an example only last week where a neighbour rang. They were really concerned about what they were hearing. They knew there were young children in the house, and in fact, a woman had harmed her male partner, and she was arrested, and safeguarding for the child taken, and so on. So there's something very important about people feeling confident that they can call if they're worried. In fact, they really must call when they are worried about it. And in your Commissioner, you've absolutely kind of upped the victim care service as well, and you've got a fantastic on your website, really great access. If people are worried about any form of vulnerability, there's great advice through your website as well, which signposts to all the various agencies and charities and fantastic people who are really good at whatever people are worried about. So that's domestic abuse. Child abuse. I'm struck by, several weeks in now, all of our partners, if that's child abuse professionals in the local authority, teachers, paediatric concerns, all of that, those normal conversations are happening as much as they ever did, just in a virtual way. Brilliant. That's exactly what we would all hope. And when we need, and if we're really worried about a child, if we need to do a home visit, it's happening. Those have not stopped. And I think it's really important that that the public know that we are all open for business. And if we need to go, we absolutely are. And there's not been one of those that's been missed. And a really good example, quite recently, there was a remote working health visitor, saw a bruise on a baby, was concerned about it, told the police, told children's services. There was a paediatric medical done, and actually all was well, nothing to worry about. But the right people very quickly got together, as the public would hope, and checked out what was going on in that family, and thankfully nothing untoward. But all of that happened exactly as it would have done pre-COVID, just in a virtual way. Still worried about missing children, still worried about children being used to transport drugs around. That's still going on, and our missing exploited team are out there talking to young people all the time, those that have been missing for a period, and finding out what's going on and making sure we can help them as we should. And sex offenders, we are still visiting sex offenders, because there is an element of just turning up that's important to that. And, you know, we had one only last week whereby we were concerned about the hardware that he had, and we've seized all of that, again, as we always have. So I think the big message on that is, if there's vulnerability, all of us, police, but also partners, are carrying on as we ever did, just in a slightly different way. One bit we've upped, though, in terms of our child abuse is we've increased the resourcing in our online child abuse team, because, as we said last time, more children at home, more ability for them to be abused. So we've really increased our resourcing on that. And just in the last month, we've executed 21 warrants for online child abuse in our area and made 18 arrests. So I don't want anyone thinking the police are not onto that, because we absolutely are. And the final one you mentioned, which is important, is fraud and online scams. We're all hearing a lot in the news, aren't we, about fake PPE and fake offers, particularly when individuals and businesses are worried about their finances. And the message is, as it ever is, if it doesn't look right and you're not expecting it, don't trust it, check it out. We are getting an increase in fraud. It's still, COVID fraud is still only about 5% of our overall fraud that we currently know about, which is, you know, similar to the national average, I understand. But, you know, people will prey on others and will take advantage of anything. So the PPE, the loans, all of those things, people need to be really alert to. But also don't think that all the other normal scams sadly have stopped, because they haven't. So, you know, be really vigilant, and particularly if you've got an elderly neighbour or an elderly relative that you're in touch with and keeping an eye on, just remind them of those kind of scams, the doorstep scams, the phone scams, the online ones, because particularly people who are perhaps, you know, alone, been there for a long time, lonely, you know, there is a greater vulnerability there that people will trick them. So just remember that conversation and make sure that we're talking about that, as well as the COVID aspects, which of course dominate all conversations at the moment. So we are concerned about that. But there's been some great work by a lot of people on the cyber work. We've got Cyberhood Watch, which I think is a great name, and that's reaching about, you know, at the moment over 130,000 people, which I'm really encouraged by. And that's all about people keeping themselves safe, knowing what to look for, putting the right protective measures in on their own online life. So that's great. But, you know, for your question, Commissioner, I'm really conscious as a Chief Constable that we're open for business, yes, but there are also different types of crime in this period that are dialed up. We're really alert to them. We've shifted our people to them, and we will do everything we can to stop them happening.
You made the point of we're all very focused on COVID-19 and the virus, the change agenda. Can you extend some thoughts on drugs a little more? So you mentioned stopping county lines and intervening. It may be that some people are more visible at the moment and therefore easier to intervene. But what are you seeing what some people would improperly call recreational drug taking and services dialing up? And are we still able to intervene where that is creating the risk for us all as well?
We're certainly able to intervene, and we have a number of operations going all the time, looking at organised criminality, major drug dealers who are looking to prey on others in our area, and that hasn't stopped. And, you know, we've got as much activity in that space as we ever had. What I know is that the drug price has gone up quite a lot. So that's because of market forces. It, as you say, it is harder when there's hardly anyone on a train, there's, you know, hardly anyone on a road. It's harder to access your market, but people are still doing it. And to answer your question, I don't have the data about recreational drug use. What I do know is the price has gone up and that the criminals are as keen to get it to market as they ever were.
And I wanted to there's two bits of a question in the press today. Some of the articles, one of them in particular, said there have been 4 crimes recently in our area. One was a forklift truck taking out a cash till out of a co-op, I think. One was aggravated burglary environment. Another one was some violence after social gathering. There were 4 examples of 4 different crimes that took place. I think, does it get lost? And should I just hear from you a reassurance that normal business is going on, but also some crime is down, but that those ones that will still find their way into the press, because criminals will in some cases still be criminal, we have the resources there to deal with those in a way that's a theme that they might like to hear your voice describing that.
Yeah, no, each of those I'm aware of. As you'd expect, I have an update each and every day about what's been going on crime-wise across Hampshire, the cities and the Isle of Wight. And as a chief constable, my time is spent worrying about crime, safeguarding, reducing vulnerability. That's what I do. Yes, I have a briefing every day on our COVID response, but actually the conversations I'm having and the leadership of this police force is very much about our core business. So sadly, you know, we know we've spoken before about our concerns about the uplift, the real increase in serious violence, which has been going on around the country and much debated. We all know that. That doesn't stop. There are, as you say, people who will take advantage of perhaps businesses being empty and, you know, look to smash their way in and take what they can. You know, I'm never complacent around that, but I'm not seeing an increase in that at the moment. Everyone is too many, of course, but I'm not seeing an increase in that. But you're absolutely right. Some crime types have reduced in this period. Some you'd kind of expect. If you think about house burglary, happily has reduced. That's because most people are at home, and you know, that's great. But others have shifted, and we've talked, haven't we, about online crime, so we know that that's shifting. So, you know, emergency demand into policing hasn't changed at all. So our 999 calls are about the same. What is great is that the non-emergency calls, the ones we're getting now, the numbers have gone down. I think I said the same a month ago, and they're very much about things that the police should be doing. So I'm enormously grateful to the public for being thoughtful about when they ring the police. If they need us, don't hesitate to call. Okay. I stress that point again. But also, you know, if it's not for the police and the police can't help, then I'm really encouraged that people are not reporting those to us. But actually, all of those cases you describe are of real concern, and I've got plenty of officers and investigators and staff who are out there with those victims right now.
Good. I make the point that, and you do too, that we serve all our communities, and one of the communities that I pay attention to is that of the policing family. And in the last few weeks, I have had a number of individuals, and also en masse the Youth Commission, wanting me to ask you this question online and live about the assaults against policing, and are they dialing up, particularly those vile and unacceptable ones of spitting and scratching and using COVID as a risk, and to ask you what support is being given to those who have been victims of these assaults. This is a public question. So, and
Commissioner, thank you for asking, and I know you're superbly supportive and take real interest in this, and my thanks also to the Youth Commission. I had a letter from them only on Friday, I think, passing on their sentiments, which I will absolutely share with the workforce here. So I'm grateful to them as well. So since COVID began, we have typically 3 or 4 officers and staff and volunteers assaulted every day. That number has stayed steady, but what I've seen is an increase in twofold. One is the ferocity of some of the assaults that we've had, and you'll remember we had an officer in Basingstoke very seriously assaulted, stabbed several times. Thankfully, I've seen him. He's out of hospital, he's back at home, and we'll be welcoming him back to work as soon as he is able. But thankfully, physically, he's going to be okay. But that was awful. And the other aspect that you say is around those who are using COVID as a weapon, frankly. And we have, you know, every day I'm hearing of another of those at least. And they're really concerning. I mean, being spat at is vile anyway. It's one of the most invasive things that my colleagues tell me when they receive it. It's truly, truly vile, because it impacts not just on you, but on those around you. And I was talking to one officer who was spat at, whose partner is about to have a baby, literally 3 weeks away from that. And therefore their concern was, if I get this, or I don't know if I've got it or not, am I going to be able to be there at the birth of my child? That's the kind of impact it has. It's vile, and it has a huge impact. We are rolling out the opportunity, if people want it, that if they have been spat at, that they can go into a hotel and keep away from their families. A lot of officers and staff are living with people who are shielded or have got who've got other underlying health conditions. They're worried about taking it home, and they're already out and about in the public domain. They do that without complaining, and they know that they're in heightened risks because of their normal duties, and I'm grateful to them for that. But to have people use this as a weapon is absolutely vile. And I know it's happening to healthcare workers, and I know it's happening to some people in shops and businesses as well. And whenever it happens, we will deal with it. And I'm really pleased that the CPS and the courts around here are giving it absolutely no quarter at all. And people are going to prison straight away for using COVID as a weapon. And I'm really encouraged with that. But sadly, every day I hear about another, and I ring people up and I chat to them about how that feels. Because, of course, often they won't know for a while whether the person actually has got COVID, as they said they had, or indeed the officer themselves has contracted it. So it's a really worrying time.
Right. And several of the people who spoke to me, including some of the young people, but not exclusively them, wanted me to say out loud that the Thursday growing custom of being out and applauding the NHS, which is entirely appropriate, when they go out, the policing family is very much in their minds. They wanted to say that they're applauding and thanking you. And do you know that?
I do, because of their letter on Friday, Commissioner. So I'm going to share that letter.
It's beyond just that letter, but there are several people who are really keen that all those in the front line, wherever they are recognised for the risks and the continuance of their duty. And so it's right for me to ask you that question and to encourage you to reinforce that sense of it. I was also asked specifically to say, what more can the community do to support policing at this time? And do you have any specific requests for our local communities?
Other than doing what they are doing, which is very much the vast majority adhering to the government's wish for all of us as citizens, and thank them for that. People are looking out for one another. That real sense of citizenship and community, which has really come to the fore, and the clapping on a Thursday is one example of that, actually manifests itself and has so many other pluses as well, in terms of people looking out for one another, people spotting people who might be upset or worried or vulnerable to something. And then the third thing is, if you need us, don't hesitate to call us online or on the phone, because that's what we're here for, and we're absolutely open for business. But if you don't need us, thanks, please don't call us. And people are being really thoughtful about that. So I would just encourage people to absolutely continue in that same vein.
Keep on keeping on engaged and thoughtful about it all for us all. Yeah. And no crime. That's it. Anybody thinking of doing a crime, could they kindly stop that?
If there was no crime, I would be delighted to no longer need to exist. Sadly, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I wanted to ask you, make a comment about special constables and ask you a question about it. You and I both know very well that we count the numbers of hours of service, and periodically I go, wow. In fact, nearly always, every time you give me the statistics, I go, wow. So I'm delighted that special constables in Hampshire have clocked up over 4,300 hours of service in the month after lockdown was imposed. Yeah. That does seem extraordinary and brilliant for sometimes a hidden additional asset that we have. It's a massive achievement and a real testament to their dedication to keeping our communities safe. They have my sincere thanks and gratitude to them on behalf of the communities that I serve, so in the voice of our communities, and to their employers for releasing them to the benefit of us all. The question I have for you is, can you tell us more about the particular role that specials have played during this time, and how the increased visibility of policing that they have provided will be sustained into the future?
Well, they have been fabulous. And of course, I mean, I'll touch on our special constabulary, but also we have volunteers more broadly, and they're all, the only two we've had to stop for reasons you'll understand is Community Speedwatch and also our volunteer police cadets who are children. We're in touch with all of those, of course. So our special constabulary, as you say, the first month, 4,000 hours. Since then, another 2,000. So at the moment, we're going 1,000 hours a week, which is extraordinary. And that's from about, 230 special constables. So I'm enormously impressed and grateful. And to your point as well, my thanks to their employers. So we've had 13 employers who've said, yeah, absolutely, we'll continue to pay you. You go off and be a special constable on our time, which is really generous of them. And one great example is our own lead special is a teacher locally in Portsmouth, and his school have said, as long as you're carrying on doing all your stuff you need to for the school and for the children as a teacher, do as much special constabling as you absolutely can. And he's very, hugely energetic, but also I'm really grateful to the school for, upfront offering that and supporting us in that way. So our special constables are very much in and with us, and they're doing a whole host of things. They're doing an awful lot of speed enforcement work for the reasons we spoke about earlier, because of making sure that our roads stay safe. They're doing lots and lots of rural patrols. If they're in cars, that's great, but they're also on foot, on bicycles. Some of them are on horses, as you know. So they're being out and about in our rural areas in enormous numbers. They're also very much kind of linked in with their neighbourhood policing teams, whenever and wherever they are. So doing all of that 3E engagement work around protecting the NHS and saving lives, but they're also doing an awful lot of normal police work that they always do. So lots of safeguarding, lots of catching criminals, lots of preventing crime happening in the first place, which is what they always do so brilliantly. So they're carrying on doing that exactly as they were. And we've got a brilliant special constabulary here in Hampshire, and they're very much integrated with the neighbourhood teams, which in a time like this means that they can just kind of join in, shift, as the whole constabulary has done in terms of new ways of working, and they've just absorbed that, and I'm hugely impressed and grateful to them.
Yay to them.
Yeah.
It would, separate from that, but including that, there are a significantly greater number of people telling me at the moment that, unasked, leaping in and saying, in this time there is much more visible policing. And you will know, and I know from my postbag and phone box and the conversations I have, that visible policing is a hallmark of what our communities want to see. And sometimes policing isn't in the public eye, but it's busy doing the most important things to keep us safer. But is it in your mind to have heard that voice about something in this time has made your team more visible, and to be alert to other opportunities, other particular areas that can be sustained into business as usual?
No, I've given it a great deal of thought. I think there's three things I'd say to that question, Commissioner. One is we have shifted more of our officers and volunteers and staff into the public domain. So, lots of our routine training that's required to keep people accredited with things, through the College of Policing, those accreditation windows have grown, which means we've been able to kind of keep people out in the public eye rather than getting their very necessary CPD in their workplace, their accreditations in their workplace. Of course, that will come again, so we'll need to do that. So we have upped our patrol. We've got really low, very, very low absenteeism. We have had throughout. We've got a really resilient workforce, so under 4% absent, mostly around the 3%. Which is a phenomenal achievement by officers and staff, and huge credit to all the wellbeing work that we do and that you support. The other aspect is, as well as visible, we're also accessible. So people are feeling us. I think we said last time, over 2 million hits a week on our Facebook pages. So local people are interested in what their local policing is doing, and they do, we know, trust us. In a world where people are rightly worried about fake news and things, they trust the messages they're getting from their police. So people are accessing our online and having engagement with us, communication with us online on a huge scale that they haven't before. But the third bit that I would ask people perhaps to reflect on is they're also at home and they're seeing us. So, you know, we do patrol. We're always out and about. We're out on foot, on bikes, in cars, and all those things. But often people are at work and they don't see us. It doesn't mean to say that we're not there. And I'm really pleased that people are looking out their windows when they're working from home and looking out of their, as I do, look out your window and see who's going by, and you notice your local policing. I'm glad they're noticing us. Good. But there is a little bit about you're at home, you see us because you're at home and you're not at work or at school.
Okay, a couple of possibly quick answers to quick questions, because we'll probably come back to this. The plan is we'll come back to this more and more. It's about the change to recovery and restoration of whatever normal business is. So the number of questions really. The first is, are there areas where policing has been able to use this opportunity as an overall reduction with the overall to make progress in key areas? And can we build on that success into the future? So are there opportunities for some interaction against the criminals' heartlands and that sort of element? And how does that lean into the preparations for some partying or criminal risks of a return when we're let loose? And are there plans and thoughts to deal with that? And then I've got a couple more questions about the criminal justice after that. But if you start with, is this a time when we can make strategic inroads into where criminals find their source of freedom to do those horrid things?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say in terms of the criminality is that, you know, we haven't missed a step with them anyway. So, you know, those who are preying on others in their homes, those who are fraudsters, those who are, you know, really looking at drug supply that you've described, those who are preying on others in the rural community, we haven't taken our eye off that ball at all. And indeed, as I've said, we've upped our game in those. So we are not, it is no easier for them than it was pre-COVID to do what they want to do. And that's our job. And we're doing everything with other law enforcement partners to ensure they absolutely know that. 999 calls haven't changed, as I've said, but what has happened, as well as the reduction in non-emergency calls into us on 101, a really great thing is that huge numbers of people have shifted their reports to us as a first step online rather than on the phone. And like anyone, it is so much easier for us if something can be done in a data way. It really cuts down our need to double key, triple key sometimes. And so, you know, it's brilliant that the public have just done that automatically. We haven't asked them to do it, they've just done it. And so having started that habit, I'm really keen that the public should stick with that habit when we do come out all of this. Yeah. The other bit that's happened is our ability to do a lot of investigations online. So face-to-face matters in an awful lot of cases, and it always will. You know, policing is a people business, and we will always be face-to-face where we need to. But lots of things we don't necessarily have to. So we've had a lot greater uptake in people giving us their evidence, whether it's digital evidence remotely and just kind of sending it in. Equally, you know, doing statements with people, not from the main victim, I don't mean that, but if you're, you know, you happen to be a CCTV operator and you're giving a statement about, you know, what you saw on the camera that day, and it's more routine for you, we can do that online too. So there's lots of ways that we've changed working, and the public have really shifted with us. Another example is
that's both efficient and effective. Check.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Not in any way, you know, if someone needs the personal touch, they get it, and that won't ever change. But a lot of the time it doesn't need it to be that way. So and also working with time slots. I think we've all got used to time slots, haven't we, in our home lives at the moment, and people are kind of responding to that as well. So if we say we're going to see you at 11:15, we see you at 11:15. It suits the member of the public in it, and of course it suits us too. So there's lots of different ways of doing that that will come from it. I think one of the things that we're less sure of, but we're doing a lot of work to understand, is where there have been crimes that haven't been reported to us as yet. So is there kind of a spike of hidden crime that will come to the fore? Now, I've talked earlier in this about how fantastically all our domestic abuse charities are working, how all of those who work with adult abuse, child abuse, and other forms of crime in the home, that we're hoping that people are continuing to get the support and help that they need. So I don't have a sense of scale of if there is a hidden spike of crime that's going to come our way afterwards. It may well be, but what we are doing is planning for that. So through our investigation command, we've got really good data about the crimes that are still in our pipeline, and we'll perhaps come on to the criminal justice system in a moment. But then therefore what capacity I've got of investigators to pick those up should they come, should there be a spike when regulation is eased in whatever way it will be eased in due course. And I'm confident that we will, we're big enough to pivot our workforce to where that demand is. And if there's more of that comes in, we'll be absolutely ready for it, Commissioner. I have no doubt.
Good. The criminal justice system, I hear you talking powerfully about some of the challenges as a whole system from partners who we know have their pressures too. The lockdown has created a reduction in capacity within the criminal justice and a backlog of cases going to court. That's widely reported. Are there things that the constabulary can do to ensure victims are kept safe while cases are being held back? Is that a tension for you?
It's a huge tension. When this began, aside from the profound health implications of the COVID crisis, as Chief Constable, the one that came to the front of my mind and has stayed there is the criminal justice system, because delayed justice is no justice. Now we know that we're continuing, as I've said, if people need to be arrested, they're arrested. If we need to safeguard, we're safeguarding. That isn't stopping. And I don't say this critically for any individual person. I work hugely closely with colleagues, of course, in the Crown Prosecution Service, in the magistrates' courts, the Crown courts, the family courts, the prisons, the probation service, judiciary, magistracy, the list goes on. We have a fantastically strong partnership across the whole criminal justice pipeline across our geography. But you'll remember back in the end of 2019, when the government came in, they talked about having a royal commission into criminal justice because it's got some really wicked problems in it. It's very complicated. There are bits that don't rub along well with other aspects. We all know that, as you said, that's well reported. Regrettably, what this whole COVID crisis has brought to the fore is all of those issues, and they've crunched together in a way that really concerns me and concerns all those other partners too. So I don't say it critically, but it is fact. So to give you a sense of scale, it's great that courts are open for remand hearings, domestic abuse, COVID cases, and they are, and they're going straight through Crown Prosecution Service. They're going to court. Brilliant. That's all working really well. I'm really pleased to see that. But all the other trials really have virtually seized up. So to give you a sense of scale around our area, which is our area and Dorset and Wiltshire, so that's our Crown Prosecution Service area, we normally have 300 trials a month. Since COVID began, we've had a handful, and this week, as I sit here on a Monday morning, I don't believe we've got any trials going ahead at all. Everyone's worried about that, but what it's creating is an enormous backlog, and I genuinely don't know, as I sit here now, whether all of those cases will go to court in future or not. I've got an assistant chief constable dedicated to this, who's fantastic and working through as much as we can with partners. We're all rolling our sleeves up on this, but I don't know the answer to that. The real issue with this, though, as you've said, is there are people, there are victims, and there are witnesses sitting in each of those cases that is not going to court. And the longer that happens, the greater the number of trials that haven't taken place. It just grows. We're in touch with those victims and those witnesses. It's hard work. It takes a lot of time, but that's nothing compared with keeping them in the loop, keeping them informed, and hopefully keeping them confident. And this morning, the update I've had is that the vast majority of victims do want to keep going ahead. They understand why, very reasonably, the courts are struggling, of course, with juries and other things. We all know that they're very genuine issues they've got to wrangle with, but those victims do want to stick with it, and they do want to get their day in court and for justice to be served. From a constabulary perspective, aside from supporting all of those, Where we can deal with cases out of court, we do. And we're one of the leading police forces around that anyway, with your support, Commissioner, and with an awful lot of the services that you put in place. So we've always been really strong at that. And if a case doesn't need to go to court and justice can be served in another way that absolutely meets the needs of the victims, but also has a material impact on that offender, then we'll do it. And we're doing as much of that as we possibly can, and we're being as creative around that as we possibly can. But there are many cases that must and should go to court, whether it's magistrates, whether that's Crown.
I think the general sense of there is room for improvement over the long term, and we must prioritise that. Yeah. And you're doing lots of things to mitigate the issues, including putting key people in to be a proper partner. Yeah. Is this a time when the risk to some victims is dialed up because the perpetrators or the alleged perpetrators are in the system and can't be managed as fully and in as timely a way to bring those who need to be off the streets? Is that on? Are victims at risk from offenders who otherwise would have been processed at the moment, who still have license to be about?
Thankfully, I haven't got any example as I sit here today of that. Some of those suspects who would be going to court will be in prison. So, we'll be awaiting their trial date. So in that regard, no change of risk to a victim. Plenty of others, though, are on bail and have got certain conditions around them. And those conditions carry on. And we monitor that. The victims very much know what they are, and as importantly, so do the suspects. And if they're breached, we'll go straight out and we'll deal with that breach. And of course, that's another, another offence that clocks up against a perpetrator. But I think, inevitably, having time where someone perhaps may feel they're getting away with something, which you and I both then know they're not. I think it's inevitable that within that lies a risk. I can't articulate that right now, and as I say,
so is the answer for victims that they should feel free to, in the contact that they have with policing and other partners and agencies, to be very clear about their concerns and risks, so that you're as fully informed as possible? Because you've already described, I mean, that they're in any normal state, and no less in this state, that response, that there will be people who the process takes a while.
Yeah.
So you would be, and your teams would be used to being alert to the need for early intervention. So the reassurance to victims is you're still there for early intervention should that be necessary. And in the conversations they have with you and other colleagues and partners in the system, they should be feel absolutely free to express their concerns, and if they have fears, what they are, so that you can be well informed and interact as necessary.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And they've got the contact details of their officer in the case, or the witness care services, depending on their role as they go towards court. So they've got all those contact details, and I would really encourage people to use them. And I'm being told that they are, which is great. But nobody wants this to be going on in terms of not having cases at court. Nobody does.
Thank you. We're nearly at the end of our time, and I've got one very quick test and answer. You and I both, policing knows that it needs more people, and I, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, know that the public want more police officers out and about, and the caste that sustains them to do the job effectively. I've invested with their local tax in it, and nationally there's an uplift programme. Are we on schedule? Are we, even in these times, still managing to journey towards greater capacity in Hampshire Constabulary?
The short answer is absolutely, and more so, and a bit more detail than that. So, as you've said, Commissioner, local taxpayers through the precept have supported an uplift in officers. And when we went into this COVID period, that none of us had done before, one of the things I said to my colleagues here in the constabulary was, we are not going to break one step around that recruitment, because this will end. And we will come out of it, and then we need to be a police service that is the very best it can possibly be. So we are recruiting. We're on track to go beyond the numbers that we wanted to have in. So we're still on track for over 600 new officers by March 21. And we're absolutely on track for that diversity of people. So we represent the communities we serve across our area. And we're absolutely on track for that as well. Huge credit to the College of Policing and local teams in our recruitment who have just completely transformed the way people do assessment centres. And we are one of only 2 police forces that is currently trialling online assessment centres. So the old day of going as a group and doing various role plays and things at various locations around the country, clearly that had to stop. So that's now done online. And as of last week, we're one of 2 police forces trialling it. I'm really excited about that. It's been carefully monitored, but I'm really clear that we will continue to recruit the numbers we promised, you and I, and our voices together to the public, and we're not stopping any of that. And in fact, I was on a call this morning with the Home Secretary on exactly that point and was able to reassure her as well.
And all the public should know that that's a question I ask you regularly, routinely, and I'm quite happy to hear we're on track, but I'm not going to let off asking that question at any point, because the outcome is what we need. I may come back to this in a future conversation that we have, but you've just made one of the quotes about our national engagement and national trialling for good advantage for local safety. And I'm beginning to hear people saying, well, where is everybody there? If they're doing these national jobs, shouldn't that be someone else's job? Where's the local? But as a starter to the conversation we can come back to, you've just described one of the advantages of our being leading and thoughtful locally is that we can trial things and deploy them to the advantage of our local communities early. And
yeah, so we are part of a national UK policing and wider law enforcement system. I'm very clear, both myself, but also the chief officers and others I have the privilege to lead, that our first priority is to this constabulary and the public we serve, no question. But there is also a role to be a part of that network, because we get a quid pro quo. We get lots of advice from others who lead on other aspects of policing in the same way that we're able to advise. But it is a tiny slice in comparison to everyone's focus being very much rooted here in our communities.
Yeah, good. The last point for this occasion is to recognise the fact that there is a bank holiday weekend with VE celebrations and a long weekend and possibly good weather, and possibly on Sunday the first of the announcements of government direction to easing of some of the constraints and restrictions of a lockdown environment. But so here we will have an expected celebratory weekend. Are there any, as the last message you and I leave with the public who may be listening to this, are there any key messages for this weekend particularly?
Well, the first one is to enjoy your weekend. And as you said, the 75th anniversary of VE Day on Friday is a very special occasion, which will be recognised and celebrated in a very different way than any of us would have expected a few months back. But, exactly as we did for Easter weekend, we will do exactly the same for this weekend. We want people to be safe. We want people to enjoy themselves, but we are out and about in huge numbers, really encouraging people to keep themselves safe, to protect the NHS and save lives. And we will continue to do that on our roads, at our ferry ports, at our coastal areas, in our parks, in our communities. We're out there doing all the things that the people would expect us to do. And I really encourage people to continue to stick with the regulation and the spirit of this regulation that our government has set out for all of us.
Yeah, so where we started on this compass today and where we finish is, in my voice and yours, thank you to all our communities for doing the right things, the vast majority of them. And my encouragement is, if we stay courteous and thoughtful and respectful of others and continue on that journey, we'll all be fine and can enjoy the weekend.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Chief Constable, thank you very much for your answers to the questions today.
Thank you.